told that clock is slow, so we'll get on with it as we're all here. Welcome to another exciting instalment of Cabinet. Hopefully we're starting to get used to structures and how all this is going to work now. Meeting number 2 for a long and happy future together. I would just want to, before we dive down the agenda on that basis, just touch on a couple of bits and then we'll crack on. Just around questions from opposition in particular. So I just wanted to feed back a little bit, I guess, in this kind of public forum around where we are. I think trying to set a kind of system that works, and we talked before about wanting to have almost kind of emergency reasons why this is the right forum to ask questions. So just by way of feedback, I think, Kate, I know your question relates to the Minister's resignation last week, which I think is probably fair, and is probably a question with short notice that probably couldn't be picked up anywhere else. So I'm more than happy with that one. Just to point out on the other two that next time I might not be in quite the same place, in that in both cases I think either conversations have already been had behind the scenes or could have been had and haven't been. So I'm conscious, for example, on health and social care, I think conversations with officers have happened, but could have happened with Matt Barney or others. And similarly, Jim, I know you've not had briefings, but could have had. They've been on the paperwork. So just to reiterate really that point that I want to keep questions here to things that haven't been able to be resolved in other places in advance. So I just want to give fair warning on that. I'm happy. I know we're all still getting used to systems, and I'm very much appreciative we've gone from 11 questions last time to 3 this time. So really welcome that. But just to say that is still an iterative process, and we can talk about that ahead of next time. And with that in mind, we'll crack on with the agenda. So declarations of interest, anybody? Nope. Minutes of the last meeting. Everybody happy with all of that? Yeah. Jolly. Apologies for absence. Chris?
Yes, Leader. So I've got apologies from Councillor Neil Clark, who is unwell, and we have Councillor Michael Adams as his deputy, substituting for him as a non-voting member of Cabinet.
Okay, thank you very much. Fabulous. Okay, right, on to the main business of the day then. I'll come to Councillor Jackson. Item 4, draft management accounts.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader. So as we've continued to recover from the pandemic, we've started to see the impact of high rates of inflation. The financial position of the County Council has continued to be monitored throughout the financial year. I can report, as colleagues will have seen from the paper, there was an underspend of £12.4 million against committee budgets in the last financial year. 7 million of this was related to adult social care and public health. Main reasons for this underspend were reduced costs associated with long-term nursing care, as well as staffing vacancies, and were largely COVID-related. Taking into account variances against the central items such as interest payments, capital charges, government grants and transfers to reserves, the underspend for the last financial year was a total of £3.1 million. At the council meeting back in February, we anticipated that general fund balances would remain unchanged. Given the outturn position, however, in these accounts, it's proposed that the council's general fund balances increase by £3.1 million to £35.2 million to help fund the significant continuing financial challenges facing the council over the medium term. Despite the difficulties faced by the council, £96 million of expenditure was invested into the capital programme during 2020 to 21. Majority of this related to school improvement projects and provided additional school places, as well as investing in improving the condition of our highways infrastructure. I draw colleagues' attention to the appendices to the report, which give further details of the outturn, the level of reserves and the allocations that have been made during the year from contingency budgets. Appendix D and E provide an update for 2 key areas of the financial governance. Appendix D sets out the financial position against the 2021 to 22 prudential indicators, which were approved as part of the budget in the previous year. And Appendix E provides a review of the council's treasury management activities for the year to the 31st of March. Significant point from these appendices is for members to note that the council did not undertake any new borrowing during the financial year in accordance with our plan. And in fact, we were able to repay £10 million of debt last year while still investing in services. Our pre-audited statement of accounts was published on the council's website on the 1st of this month and will be presented to future Governance and Ethics Committee on the completion of the annual external audit, which is currently underway. We should note that there are significant risks and uncertainties associated with the current environment in which local authorities are operating, both in the short term and the medium term, and the ongoing one-year local government settlement received from central government restricted the authority's ability to plan into the medium term with confidence. In addition to this, the rising levels of inflation that are currently affecting our residents are also impacting on our budgets, as we'll demonstrate in the next item, and the demand for services in the short term. Further risks and uncertainties were set out in the budget report to full council last February and are articulated in the budget monitoring report that comes next on the agenda. So I move the recommendations, Chairman. Happy to answer any questions members have.
Thanks, Richard. A couple of things to pick up on. I think there's some really positive news in there. Obviously, general fund balance and the flexibility and the cushion that gives us with all sorts of uncertainties and challenge ahead is positive news. And the fact that we are paying off debt rather than borrowing is good news for everybody from that point of view. So, I think we're in a healthy position from that perspective. Has anyone else got any points to raise? Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. If I could, on page 10, paragraph 17, I think this really is a positive story as far as the Economic Development Asset Management Committee is concerned, of £1.3 million underspend. And we used to think as underspend as a bad thing, but actually, where I'm pleased in this, it's not mainly because of staffing. If you read the paragraph, a lot of it is because of the management costs of our buildings is reducing. As we shrink the estate, go into smaller, more efficient buildings, it's showing that our strategy in terms of the one Nottinghamshire estate is starting to work. And so I'm really, really pleased in that. And I'm starting to think that maybe the savings that we anticipated making from making those decisions is a bit conservative, actually. I think we would end up saving a lot more than we anticipated. So I'm really pleased about that particular paragraph. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. If anything, you coin a phrase, it might be concrete evidence of the fact that the system is working.
Sorry, I forgot to say about the concrete evidence, but yeah, we've got concrete evidence that it is actually working.
Good, real concrete evidence this time. I think, positive news and shows that a sense of direction in terms of coming down from those 17 down to the handful of buildings we've got left, and the investment in Top Wigay will hopefully help us move even further forward on that, which is positive news. Any other thoughts and comments from Cabinet members? No. Councillor Coomer, do you want to come in on this one or the next one?
Probably the next one, Chair. Thank you very much.
Problem. That is fine. Anything else to add, Richard, before we move on from this one?
No, only on borrowing, and you're quite right. And we set out that we wanted to reduce borrowing, keep it to that sort of 10%, and we're on the right trajectory for it, which is good to see, and we'll continue with that, really.
Great. Thank you very much. Right, in that case, only remains to ask everybody if they are in favour of recommendations in the report. All in favour? That looks to be unanimous. You can't vote, can you? Tried to vote. Thank you very much. And back to you, Richard, for agenda item 5, financial monitoring report.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader. A lot of this was rehearsed in answer to a question at council on Thursday, which colleagues were at, so I won't try not to tread over old ground there. In fact, it was 2 questions which I repeated. So if I can just turn to the report. Table 1 sets out summary revenue budgets for the coming year. Currently anticipated year-end position is an overspend for the council of 4.4 million, which reflects changing circumstances that we're facing along with the rest of the world, particularly the estimated impact of inflation. We can see from the report that significant variances are set out, together with a number of management actions that are being implemented to respond to these financial challenges. Paragraphs 12 and 13 set out the requests from contingency, including the budget adjustments arising from last year's pay settlement and some money towards the Tour of Britain and the Platinum Jubilee events. Report also sets out a number of emerging pressures that will affect our in-year budget as well as across the medium-term financial strategy. We've set aside sufficient reserves from prior years through careful management of the budget that will enable us to manage the financial challenges in the short term. We'll continue to monitor these emerging pressures throughout the year, and the future impacts will be considered as part of the budget setting progress for next year. Moving to the capital programme briefly, Table 3 shows good news with our continued investment in services and communities, with anticipated investment of nearly £150 million this year. A number of variances to the programme include investment in Clayfield House, fostering services and green investment in line with our vision and ambition set out in the Nottinghamshire plan. I think to reassure residents, what this report really sets out is that we have finances which are robust. We're facing challenges which everybody is facing at the moment. We're not immune to inflation, quite obviously, but I think because of reserves that we've got, because of prudent management in the past, we're well placed to weather that storm and to reassure residents that we'll continue to deliver the services that everybody relies on.
Thanks, Richard. That's really helpful. I think we touched on general reserves and some of that ability to be flexible and to adapt as we go forward. Significant uncertainties, obviously, out there, not least the social care reforms that we'll no doubt come on to. So a healthy financial position at this stage is highly important. There's all sorts of things that will no doubt get done to us over the coming months and years we're going to have to respond to. So thank you very much. Any thoughts and questions from anybody else, Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I think it's testament to the 151 officer and Richard, actually, that the anticipation of what they thought was coming in the future, as even though it wasn't quite as much as has come, it weren't far off, whereas other councils are way behind in their anticipation of the increasing costs. So I think they should be sort of thanked for that, at least that, because we could have been in a whole different position if they hadn't anticipated as much as they had.
No, I think that's right, and testament to that good work. I think Nigel and team, when we were talking earlier on prior to the meeting about, it's easy as a councillor to look at the budget and just fiddle with some of those estimates for the future and try and make the books balance, but we're not in that place, and we've done a good job of setting a genuinely balanced budget that we can take forward in a strong position, so that is good news. Any other thoughts from Cabinet members? No, in that case, Jim, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. And before moving on, just say thank you for letting us speak, and I'm sure we will iron out any differences and get things sorted, that everything can be up and above board. So again, thank you for that, but thanks for the lead. And the financial monitoring report, going back to that a little bit, has flagged some issues which no longer be concerning Cabinet, such as 4.4 million overspend, and highlight financial challenges the Council expected to face in the medium term. Regardless of, at this moment in time, we've actually done an excellent job, I will admit that. I acknowledge the solutions to this are to manage budgets more effectively and to deliver in-year savings. I personally have confidence in the officers of this council. They're doing everything within their power to manage their budgets effectively, and the external pressures they are currently under and the rising demands for our service means this is going to be much easier to say than do. So again, thanks for the officers. I think they're under a lot of pressure. They have been and will continue to be so. I'm slightly concerned about the euphemistic suggestion to deliver in-year savings, because that, to me, could be another way of just saying deliver fewer services to save money. And that is a real concern. And that isn't something we in the Labour group would welcome, because the people out there need the council services now more than ever. Page 4 of agenda item 5 is a very helpful list of main risk areas to the council. Within this year's budget, it might be helpful for the public to be able to see this list put against decisions and actions the Cabinet are taking to influence and mitigate these risks, because these risks aren't inevitable, and although they aren't entirely within the gift of this Cabinet or the Council to solve, as elected representatives, councillors can make representations to government and other stakeholders and speak up for public, and it's my view that Cabinet could be doing more of this. I mean, simple traffic light system to highlight may be very useful, being as these are public documents as well. So some simple measures as well, just for information purposes. I won't go into the detail of the various service overspends and underspends, but for the benefit of the public, it appears we're spending more on things we'd be spending less on, and less on the things we should be spending more on. A bit of a dichotomy there. So our request for Cabinet today is simple. Will councillors have the opportunity to look at the detail within this budget through the council's scrutiny processes? Because I'm sure you would agree it would be sensible to learn the lessons of what we've gone wrong in this year's budget, or to better inform next year's budget. Now that the final point is raised is clearly going to be the biggest risk to future budgets. Several Conservative leadership candidates have indicated that they want to cut public spending by as much as 20%. If this were to happen, what would be the impact of this council's budget and on the services we provide? And this is an urgent question at the moment, because obviously there's going to be a new leader before the new sessions of Parliament, so it will affect us before the new or may affect us before the new financial year comes into effect. A 20% cut would be massive for any councils around the country. It will mean that some of the ambitions made by this cabinet simply won't be deliverable. If I were you, I would be concerned about that and would be vocal and speak out against reckless policies like that. I don't see how we're going to level up, especially level up with 20% cut to services. We've got an inflation, and depending on what you use, CPI or RPI, of over 11% at the moment and likely to increase. That is going to affect our budgets. I know we've budgeted well for 8% increase, and we're going to survive that. And the officers have done an excellent job in preparing that level. I would like to know, and again going back to the scrutiny process or whatever processes we're going to use, how we're actually going to manage the budget if it hits 12%, 13%. Now, it's a possibility, but a 20% cut is even more of a possibility. If that happens, what is going to happen?
Jim, can I keep you on the cabinet papers rather than trying to guess what future leadership candidates might do? That's not all right.
But the part of it, which has been alluded to by Councillor Girling as well, is looking into the future, which the officers and the cabinet have actually done quite well. So it is looking into the future. And thank you very much, Chairman.
Thanks, Jim. I note I've written down the phrase "excellent job," and I assume Andrew in the corner there has written that down as well. So we'll crack on from that point. I'll let Richard come in on the details of the budget. I just wanted to touch on that point, which, to be fair, is the reason I started this conversation with making sure these things are urgent and related to cabinet papers. It's not really, so it's a bit cheeky. I would point out, perhaps in a political point, the difference between understanding of what some of those comments from leadership candidates mean around prioritising and focusing on the public services and things that are most important to people is different to cutting stuff, and maybe that's an ideological difference between the two of us. They don't necessarily mean the same thing. But clearly, you know, in recent months and years, some of those candidates who've been talking about those things and changing the way government approaches things and small government approaches are also responsible for one of the very generous local government settlement we got in November. Same person. So it's worth just cutting across that straight away and saying I don't think anybody has said anything about knocking 20% off local government budgets. So we'll just clarify that up front. Do you want to pick up on the detail on the report, Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. You know a lot more about the leadership contest than I do, and I don't envy you for being in the middle of it at the moment. As I understand it, the one who was talking about 20% top slicing has been knocked out in the first round, so I don't think we need to concern ourselves too much with that. All I would say is whoever the new leader is, whenever they are elected, we've got a leader here that's right in the middle of it and will not cease to bang the drum for more funding for us. And whether that's more funding for local government across the board or actually the fairer funding we've been waiting for a long time, I think we're pushing at an open door now, whoever is in a position to deliver it. I did note the excellent job comment, so I won't mention it again, Leader. Councillor Craig, I thank Jim for his question. I mean, you said that some of these things were easier to say than to do, and they are, but we are absolutely determined to do them. And as I said, as I open this, what we're not going to do is reduce services. So we need to deliver the services that we'd always planned to deliver. If they cost more, we've got to find efficiencies, or we've got to find reserves, which we've put away over recent years to deal with things like things like this. So we'll continue to do that. And I would again assure the public that the services are what we're here for. And we have to find a way to pay for them rather than find ways to reduce them if and when inflation starts to bite. Just as a background, these reports, for members who weren't previously on Finance Committee, these reports came monthly to Finance Committee, and we had lengthy discussions on them at most of those committees. Opposition groups have the opportunity of a full briefing on these reports. As I understand it, I don't think Councillor Kramer's group took that up this time, but I'm sure they can do in the future. So there will be scrutiny ongoing right the way through the process on the Financial Monitoring Report. It's already scheduled in for Councillor Elliott's overview committee at some point, I think in November, and again in January, November and January. So we're looking forward to that, and actually looking forward to a more sort of collegiate approach to putting the budget together next time, because that's the opportunity to do it in the new system. So we'd look forward to opposition groups' contribution to that. I think the final thing to say is this is just Period 2's monitoring report. The figures that are in it are a projection on the trajectory that we're on as what overspends might be. As we start to come to solutions to some of those and push back at some of those, we would like to see those reducing in the future, albeit that it's quite likely that inflation will increase. And so it's a challenge, but I look forward to opposition's contribution to helping us to fight that. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I think the key thing to highlight, perhaps, from what you've said is in this new cabinet structure, there's going to be more and earlier opportunity to look through budget proposals and processes, as you and Councillor Litt have highlighted. So hopefully that reassures you, Jim, that there's that chance to dig through this in more detail. And I hope perhaps challenge back to you and to the other opposition group as well about bringing forward your thoughts and proposals in that process as well, because it would be great to be able to dig through in detail your ideas and thoughts and to be able to include those if they are helpful and useful. So throw that challenge to you. I'd written down some other things, but I don't think necessarily need to pick them up, other than you mentioned tackling rising demand and how we do that. I would hope that through all the transformation kind of work that we're doing in that budget process, particularly in children's, but following through in other areas, adults and others, where we know that demand is rising. We've been talking in the early budget conversations in recent weeks about the need to tackle that challenge, because we're not in a place where we're trying to deal with reducing government funding anymore. We're in a place where we're trying to deal with increasing demand on services. And I've challenged officers and cabinet members around the council to bring me those proposals and ideas that we will fund from in order to implement things that reduce that demand. So we've got lots of work in that space to try and achieve that. So anything else from cabinet members before I move on? No. Thank you very much. Right, in that case, we'll move on to agenda item 6. Oh, I need to vote. All in favour of the recommendations of that report? Not you, Mike. Good. That is unanimous. Again, we'll move on then to number 6, key decision on adult social care. Councillor Barney.
Thank you, Leader. So, pleased to introduce this paper. It's rather dryly titled Adult Social Care Market Pressures. But in essence, this paper is all about people. And I just wanted to take a moment to highlight and champion our amazing home support care staff that operate throughout Nottinghamshire. And while I'm in this portfolio, I think more than anything else, I want to highlight the extraordinary work done by our incredible staff across Nottinghamshire, year in, year out, doing some of the most difficult duty-bound jobs, providing basic care to two groups of people, really. Either those who've come straight out of hospital and need a little bit of support, changing dressings, taking care of wounds, whatever that might be for the short term, or even the longer term, in some cases providing care and support for people with long-term mental health issues. Difficult, tough work, often not recognised, often forgotten, and so often underpaid, as we all know. So really, really, this report is about those people, and I don't want to lose that fact. This is about people and about responding to that most worthy need of our amazing staff. But all of that said, and not to hide in any way at all, I think we're all very well aware of the enormous pressures that are faced in social care, and not just in this local authority, but in all local authorities across the country. There are significant challenges, and I think those challenges are most acutely felt in the funding of our staff and the recruitment and retention of recruitment of our staff. And as this report highlights, sadly, in Nottinghamshire, we've got a turnover rate of about 30% in the care home market staff workforce, which is far too high. And there are a variety of reasons for that. It's more complex than just the financial aspect of how much we pay people. Issues related to COVID have had a significant impact, but also the way we employ people across Nottinghamshire. New businesses springing up, the likes of the Amazon warehouses, are having their impact, and they can offer more attractive rates of pay for better schedules, and actually, to be honest, easier work in many respects. Going back to the points I made, this is tough, challenging, difficult work that these guys are doing on our behalf day in, day out. So, this paper, what's it about? Well, it's about, in some respects, trying to address that imbalance of pay and provide more pay to our incredible staff. And as well as that, it's about ensuring, and I think this is an important detail just to draw out, that this is a local authority leader can continue to meet our statutory responsibilities as set under the Care Act in 2014, our basic responsibilities, which I think are under threat if we're not able to ensure that we have the right tools in place to keep our workforce in place and financed. So, this report sets out proposals for addressing the current instability in the market and how we seek to meet increased future demand. And it does that very simply by suggesting a £1 per hour uplift to the support and enablement services paid from September 2022. The total cost of this is likely to be somewhere around £5 million, so really significant funds, which is why I'm grateful to be able to bring this to Cabinet. This is taxpayers' money we're spending after all. But as highlighted, I don't think we have any choice. But more than that, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. These guys need to be honoured and thanked for the work they're doing. I wish we could do more. This is only a first milestone step, but it's needed, and I encourage all members to vote in support. So as such, I move the recommendations which are set out on page 62 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Eloquent as ever. And right, you know, we're in a scenario where with recruitment and retention challenges as they are, we certainly have to do something, and hopefully this is a positive step to support that service and the staff involved. Have Cabinet members got any thoughts, comments, questions? No? This is easy, isn't it, today? Kate, did you want to come on this item? Oh, it's Mike, isn't it? Do you want to come on this one or the next one? This one, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks for letting us speak. And please don't be fearful of my question. This is a positive question, recognised by all of us. And I thank Councillor Barney for introducing the paper. Let me just refresh everybody's memory, because it was 5 months ago that Councillor Creamer put forward exactly this proposal in the budget amendment that we put forward. So we're all on the same page here. There's been a time delay, but we're all on the same page here, and we all recognise the value in paying those people who are on the front line the right amount. And again, as Councillor Barney has referenced, this is probably the first milestone, and if we could do more, and when we're able to do more, we shall do more. And I agree with you, we will fully support that, as I'm sure you will with us. The paper itself references the £1 uplift for everybody, but in paragraph 13, it references that between 50 and 55% of the funding that we offer is only what is recognised in wages. So my question really is to clarify and to follow on from Richard and Nigel's responses to the finances and the way that we operate here, and that if we're offering £5 million as an uplift for wages, that £5 million actually goes for wages, and that we can be able to reference that at a later date. I'm assuming all the businesses we deal with have accountants, and at year ends will be able to produce that and tell us exactly how much we want. That's what we want to see. This £5 million has to go on the front line workers, in which case it will tie in exactly as to what Councillor Creamer put forward in the budget 5 months ago. But it's really pleasing to see that we're all on the same page here and recognising that these workers deserve more. And I'm sure Andrew will have written down the fact that it was a Labour proposal in budget. And I wouldn't have said that, but I could not leave it. Thank you, Chairman.
And also that you think we're doing exactly the right thing here. So sure. Thanks, Mike. Matt, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, delighted to. I think there were two points there, really. And Councillor Pringle, as I'm getting to know you, I absolutely appreciate that we are on the same page in terms of wanting to do the best we possibly can, and I genuinely accept that. I just think on the point made about it being your idea, I don't really care who gets the credit for it as long as we do the right thing and this is implemented. Well, I need to, sorry, Andrew, I'd refer to you directly. I need to just highlight the fact that whilst I might be delighted to allow the credit to go in some ways to the Labour Party, I'm not going to, because this has been in motion and play for many, many months going back long. But I've only been here 2 months, so I certainly can't take the credit. But looking behind me, Councillor Boyd-Elliott, who was in this portfolio for many months before me, will I think, concur with the fact that I think the first conversations about this were put in place 11 months ago. And unfortunately, Melanie's on holiday today, but both Melanie and Jonathan here, I think, would confirm that this has been back and forth, not only through the adult social care portfolio, but also through the leader's office over many, many, many months. It's complex, and the outworkings of how we actually implement this are detailed. And as such, I'm sorry to say, and to steal your thunder, it's been worked up over many, many months. So anyway, so that's the first point. I really don't want to get in playing politics with this issue either, because we are all on the same page, and I think it rather cheapens it. So great news that it's happening. The other aspect about the finances being utilised appropriately for staff, I hate to say this, but again, I completely agree with you. And when this was first brought to my attention now, about 6 weeks ago, I was quite annoyed, as it was suggested to me, that we do not have the complete ability to insist that every last penny of this is spent where we want it spent, which is on frontline care. And it's a personal bugbear of mine that goes back many years over how procurement frameworks and protocols and legalities around such inhibit the public sector from spending the money where it darn well ought to be spent. We don't have to do that with the money as we spend it at home in our own finances. Why should the government be tied up in the loop? Anyway, so unfortunately for our officers, they had a little bit of my personal politics coming into play on this. But there is a framework in place. Unfortunately, we do not have the ability to pull the levers as we might want to, as strongly as we might want to. However, to provide some reassurance, and it has reassured me to some degree, the way this finance will be proportioned will be on an open book basis. So we will be able to see exactly how care operators choose to spend this fund, and we will be able to make comments as appropriate in whatever direction they do. Now, I have to say that looking back over the past, and we have some track record with this as well, because as we've administered various COVID grants and entitlements from COVID, which we've been able to pass on to care providers, they have utilised and used those monies to enhance, in the most part, the amount they pay their staff, either in short-term bonuses or in longer-term pay packages. So the precedent for this is good. Again, we had open book and we were able to see, and the outworking of that has been quite reassuring. So I'm really, really pleased about all that. I think the final thing to say, and I hate to use this expression because this is going back a little bit politically, but good old-fashioned market economics probably would also dictate that care providers will put the money where it needs to be spent. Otherwise, their operations are not sustainable. They're already losing 30% of their own workforce. The only way they can recompense that is to pay more. So if they want to stay in business, they're going to have to pay their staff. So market economics, at the end of the day, hopefully will also prevail. So that's the answers that I'm willing to offer. But, Leader, if you have anything to add, or anybody else, grateful to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Excellent. And, bully for market economics is always good. Yeah, really important, I think, that we're building those relationships with providers because, as you say, although we don't have that direct control, we can certainly, through those relationships and networks, try to support and influence and make sure that we are seeing what we want to see. And the fact that we have that kind of open book conversation gives us the ability to try and influence and try and do that as much as we can. And obviously, we've got a big old lump of reform in that sector to come over the next year or two, which hopefully drives that engagement in that direction that we can offer as well in that space. So anything further from Cabinet members? Richard?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Just to row back to February, really, this is money that we predicted we would need to invest at some point this year. What we talked about in February, and let's not forget, on budget day, inflation had just that day reached 4%. I think it was 4.1 on that very day. It was predicted to peak at about 7%. We thought the pay award was going to be 3%. It's now going to be 5%. Inflation's now 9% and predicted to peak at 11%. So we're in quite a different world than we were in February. What we said in response to Labour's well-meant proposal to spend this back in February was, rather than just chuck public money at this problem back then, we would take our time to look at the issue, see what other authorities were doing, because there's lots of different approaches to this in different authorities across the country, because it's a national issue. We've had time to do that, and I know Matt's done that over the last few months, and so we've come up with this as a well thought through, worked through proposal, which we really do think will make a difference, rather than just as a knee-jerk reaction on the day, spending £5 million of taxpayers' money without all that thought. So I think this is the right thing to do, but it's the right time to do it as well, and we're right to have taken the time to consider exactly what we're doing, because it was always a do this wrong, and all it would do is just push the market price up with no positive effect at the end of it. So fully support the approach that Matt and his team have taken.
Thanks, Richard. Mike's wanting to come back in, and
I really want
setting a precedent, Mike. You've got to be nice.
No, I really don't, and I really want to be nice. But obviously, the budget setting was agreed with Nigel, so it wasn't just a whim. But there certainly is positivity in what's happening today, because we're all in unity about it.
Yeah. No, that's helpful, Mike. Thank you. I hope to come back to the challenge on the budget. We're going to have more open, earlier process in terms of scrutiny and budget. So if you bring forward thoughts, proposals, ideas, bring them forward early, give them a chance to do that due diligence, and then we can include things, because if we only hear about it on the day, it's hard to dig those things out. So helpful. Any further Cabinet comments? No? In that case, I just ask everybody to vote. Are we all in favour of those recommendations? Very good. Thank you very much. And we'll move on back to you, Matt, adult social care reform.
Thanks, Ben. I'll try and be quicker on this one, not least because I talked at length about it last week at full council and probably bored everybody to tears. But in essence, this subject matter is extremely complex. I'm still grappling with it, and I think it would take a lifetime to become an expert in all the detail that there is in every one of these social care reforms which are being brought into play. But I wanted to take a moment, really, to give a slightly more reflective and personal view of what this is about. And it seems to me that we could have taken a couple of different routes with this, and with the highlighting this risk, which is really all we're doing here, is we're highlighting risk. We could have been magpies and we could have hidden the truth, and we could have chosen to not be honest and open and transparent. And equally as well, I think we could have, because it is complicated and it's pretty hellish to unpick, we could have been ostriches and we could have buried our heads in the sand and tried to hope that all would be well. And I actually think there's a lot of local authorities in the country that are taking one of either of those two approaches, but not this authority. And I have to say thanks again to the officers that usually be flanked on both my sides and all the other supporting officers. We thought it was really important to be utterly transparent about the situation we face, which is enormously significant. This is actually, when you get into the detail of this, potentially quite scary stuff. And the reason this report needs to come to Cabinet and for Cabinet members to be aware is just to highlight that risk. Hopefully, it will not come to pass, it won't be scary, but the risk is there and we need to be aware of it. So that's what we're doing. And I don't know if you remember, Leader, our first ever conversation that you and I had. I'm sure you don't, but I do. And I've expressed to you strong concerns about how your double-hatted role as Leader and MP might pan out and whether it was really something you should be considering. And I have to say that in working on these aspects of social care reform in the last 6 weeks, any concerns that I might have had have been completely allayed, in that it is just extraordinary the degree to which you have got involved in the detail on this and have championed really nationally on behalf of not just our local authority, but other local authorities who are all faced with the same problem at a national level, the issues and the outworking which is faced by us all in implementing these policies. Now, just on the policies themselves, I think they're excellent as individual items and elements. I think it's absolutely fantastic that we are looking to bring into play reforms to the way we pay for social care that have never been tackled for generation after generation, as I said last week. I think that's brilliant. And I think other aspects as well, the Mental Care Act and health reforms, really important stuff. This is people's lives. It's massively out of date, needs to be done. The problem, and if you see in the report, I think it's page 79, yes, is the timetabling of these things. They're all happening at once. And they're on the back of a perfect storm, really, where we've already referred to in the previous paper the market pressures that we face with staff and so on and so forth. So it's difficult. And I know that there is a sense of anxiety in this authority and how we we're going to meet all these aspects as they come at once. However, all could be well because there is an allocation of funding. There's billions of pounds. The numbers are all huge and very, very complicated. But the problem is that that funding has not yet been apportioned or set out, and the rules on how that is going to be implemented and the timeframe for that hasn't been explained. And that's the role that Councillor Bradley has been able to articulate more passionately, I think, than any other politician in the country, because he feels the pain and exposure with his role as being leader of a local authority and knows the effect this will have if we don't get our ducks in a row. So, again, risk but reassurance, and I think we're well placed because of the role that Ben is taking on this. Numbers are huge. We're talking billions and billions of pounds. What does that mean? Well, for this authority, if we're not able to meet this risk, we're potentially talking about perhaps 90 million shorthole in our annual funding, which is huge, because at that point we're talking about which one of these cabinet members' portfolio are we going to fire, are we going to do away with. So it's pretty significant. It won't be education and it won't be health, I'm sure. But anyway, so that's why we're flagging it. And as I say, the money is there. It needs to, with the detail of how that outworks needs to come forward. So what are we doing about it to mitigate the risk? Well, the officers here have put together a framework, a multifaceted framework, 5 different areas of response around each of the various items of reform. I'm not going to list them because I'm taking too much time here. The other thing that we're doing, and I think we're doing, again, as I said last week, probably better than most, is working with ADAS. And again, thanks to Melanie's role with ADAS, we're ensuring that we've got a consistent approach with other local authorities in how we're presenting this, the detail on this. And we're also working with other local authorities to minimise costs. And that, coupled with the lobbying we're doing, I think puts us in a really, really good position. And exploiting you as the mouthpiece nationally on this issue is a really good thing. So, I've said enough. The risk is there. It's great and extreme. Hopefully, Armageddon won't come to pass, and not least because of this authority's role in articulating that argument. And going forward as well, I hope that whoever the new Conservative leader is continues with the social care reforms as set out, because they're important. They were the right thing to do, and they remain the right thing to do. And as such, I move the recommendation which is set out on page 76, is it, of the report. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Barney, you make me blush. Bless you. No, really helpful, thank you. It's worth saying and reiterating that we are trying to push this with government. There is a gap, clearly, but there is money also allocated, as you said. It's just not directly been allocated to us yet. And if we see that, and if we see that national insurance funding and a fair amount of that apportioned to local councils to deliver this service, then that actually would potentially fill that financial gap. So hopefully a fairly simple solution. And we've talked also about the pace of change. Absolutely right. They're just trying to do all this at the same time as trying to manage those day-to-day services that are hugely under pressure is a real challenge. I think government have already agreed to delay some elements of it in the last few days and weeks. So that gives us a bit of breathing space. So as you said, Matt, I'm confident that there are solutions that we can find on the way through this, and we've been raising it in the Commons as well, particularly around kind of the county councils network and some of the other data that's come forward on this that shows it's not a Nottinghamshire problem, or it's a national problem, and one that other authorities are reflecting the same challenges. So I'm confident that government will back that up, and as I say, has already started to make some changes in terms of timeframes to try and make that a little bit easier. So touch wood, we'll be able to drive that, and as I say, hopefully use our influence in that space to make those policy changes as well. Does anyone else want to come in on this? No. Very straightforward. Good. Anything else to add, Matt? No? Happy. Perfect. All right, then in that case, all those in favour of recommendations for item 7? Thank you. Councillor Girling making a case for which department we should scrap if we don't get the funding there. Very good. Right, move on to agenda item 8, which is me. So devolution update. I won't go through all the details in the paper, but effectively to say that our negotiations are ongoing, our engagement with partners is ongoing. We're now meeting weekly with the 4 upper tier leaders across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, which is very constructive, and everybody is broadly on the same page in terms of our kind of agenda and outcomes we want to see. We're meeting monthly with the Economic Prosperity Committee, taking our districts and boroughs through all of this. And I think it's worth saying that the last public meeting, which was probably about 3 weeks ago now, we looked at where we're at. We looked at some governance proposals to go forward, and those proposals were unanimously supported by all districts and boroughs across the county in terms of our plans for the next few months. So it's worth noting, perhaps for the public record, that wherever you may see criticism in the newspapers, that when it comes to the actual meetings and the work, all councils are within Nottinghamshire are backing and supporting and voting for those arrangements, which is really helpful. Next week we'll meet with all districts and borough and upper tier councils across the whole of the D2N2 area, supported by Elizabeth Fagan and the Local Enterprise Partnership in terms of bringing that group together. And it's important that we try and do more and more on that footprint in terms of planning this. We don't want to get into a kind of 2-speed system where we're up here and Derbyshire are there, or vice versa. So we're trying to do more on that scale, and increasingly that is positive and constructive. Again, we've taken proposals to that group previously, and it has been broadly supported. We try and do that again in a few weeks with a kind of update report and make sure everybody is bought in appropriately. There certainly is a recognition across that whole space of the potential benefits of all of this, both financially and in terms of the clout that it gives us to tackle some of the challenges that we have put forward in the negotiations. Those negotiations are continuing with government on a fortnightly basis, so you'll see in the paperwork that there are different themes that we are working on with government over the course of the summer, with a view to having agreements into the autumn. And The first few of those meetings have taken place now, I think, on transport and also on skills. Working through different departments is interesting because you obviously work with local government department who would like have a very clear agenda, and then you go and talk to other departments who have varying views on what they would and would not like to give away. So we've got some work to do there to negotiate with them. But we certainly have the view across those partners that we want to get the biggest and most ambitious deal that we can. We're going to go and ask them for absolutely everything under the sun, and we'll no doubt get paired back to something in the middle. But so far that's been constructive, and the feedback from both sides, from officials, ministers, and from our own negotiating kind of teams, which is largely, I think, place directors across the different councils, has been really positive. We've also brought on some additional resource in the form of Deloitte, who are helping us with capacity, helping us with some of their expertise from being involved particularly in the Greater Manchester deal. Obviously, we've got an incredibly capable team of officers, but none of whom have done this before, so that is really helpful, I think, and it also gives us the ability to perhaps have some independent oversight. What I don't want is to get into a place where, you know, Nottinghamshire says X and Derby City says Y, and we've got to fall out about it. Having that independent leadership, I think, will be really helpful in terms of managing these processes and bringing us all together. So that is all positive. It's worth saying, because the obvious elephant in the room is the minister's changed. Nothing has changed in terms of our negotiations. We're talking with officials, and those meetings have continued. In fact, I understand from the Chief Executive this morning that additional meetings have been put in with officials through that negotiation process. So nothing has changed from that point of view. And I think the Prime Minister said in Prime Minister's questions yesterday that the continuation of that levelling up agenda as is absolute top priority. So we can take some comfort from that. I wouldn't predict anything to change with regards our deal in that regard. So I think that's it from me. Happy to take any thoughts, questions from Cabinet members first. No? Go on, Bruce.
Mine is just a comment, really, from my behalf, and also I think as most Cabinet members. Levelling up is extremely important to us, extremely important. It is one of our major positives that we've had since we've taken over control of this council. It is the opportunity for us to do more for our residents that we've never had before. And I will be doing, and I'm sure everybody else in this chamber will be doing everything in their power to ensure that even whoever takes over as the new leader of the new Prime Minister, new leader of the Conservative Party, that levelling up continues to be at top of their agenda, because this is our opportunity to improve the lot of the people of Nottinghamshire.
Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think from an economic development point of view, the sooner this happens, the better. It's quite frustrating that we've got to have to wait as long as we do, really. I think the sooner we can get it so that we're making the strategic decisions based on what we understand because we live here, rather than some suit in Westminster looking at Google Maps and thinking they know what we should be getting, the better as far as I'm concerned. And I really look forward to this coming through, because I genuinely believe and truly believe that the benefits to the people out there will be phenomenal. And I think that's a challenge for us. We've got to demonstrate to those people that tick the boxes and vote for whichever party they vote for, that actually the benefit of what this is going to bring is really, really substantial. And I think we've got to do quite a bit of work on that.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, maybe it's worth, we've made good progress in this meeting this morning, just touching on some of those benefits, because we talked in a very abstract way about, you know, X thousand jobs and X billion GVA. It doesn't mean a lot to the average man in the street. I'm always conscious of not wanting to get ahead of other partners across the region in terms of explaining the benefits of all of this, but I certainly have a view in terms of the various potential benefits, because we've got to get the structure in place, we've got to get a mayor who will decide these things, but there are huge potential benefits that I think are visible for us from where we are now. If you look down the list of different areas of negotiation, if you like, so take skills for example, we all know that we have people who are unemployed, that we have job vacancies that we can't fill, and the challenge is that the skills don't match up with the jobs. The ability for us to direct those courses and that training to the skills gaps that we have, to be able to target the people that we want to in terms of getting those people on those courses, to do that through the right institutions, and to join up career paths in the way that is happening with NTU and West Knox College, for example, at the minute, to expand that so that people can see, within my community, I can do my health post-16 course, my HE course on the same site, and I can see the hospital from the college that I'm going to go and work in afterwards. I think gives a huge amount of certainty and a pipeline of staff into those sectors, and we can expand that across different areas of skills. We can expand that across the whole geography. So as a simple example of something that we could do through this structure with the funding and the powers over adult skills in particular, and we're pushing the government to try and let us down into post-16 and some of the other things they've not done in other places to pilot these things. A huge opportunity for us to make a real difference, and perhaps I'll highlight one more rather than go through the whole list. So when we're talking about, there are some things that are very structured in terms of the negotiating framework, some things that will be copied and pasted from other places like skills or transport, where we can try and be ambitious, but there are frameworks that exist in other places. We've also been asked for, what are the softer things that don't exist in other places? What are the things you'd want to pilot and try? And those who follow my kind of policy agenda will know I'm really passionate about youth and young people and how we do that kind of early help and preventative work. We're already, even though we haven't got the framework, in a position to kind of try and pilot some of these things to prove a case, so that when we go back through the course of all this, we can go to government and say, devolve that pot of funding to us, because here's something we've done on a small scale. We've proven some outcomes. And now we want you to give it to us so we can expand and we can do it across the whole geography. So, for example, we're talking to government at the minute about the Youth Investment Fund, which is about putting capital investment in youth centres and community hubs into some of the most disadvantaged communities in the county, which will allow us then to work with partners to put services in, to put youth services in, skills, careers, health services into those most disadvantaged communities. Try and break that cycle of poverty, try and raise ambition to try and support those people who most need it. And if we can prove that case in a small estate or in a community, we can offer access to open access youth services in a community like that, and we can show that working with people like the NYA who want to measure these things and make the case to Treasury. Then we can go back and say, what, next time I don't want to bid into the Youth Investment Fund, I want you to just allocate that fund to our combined authority, and we will do it and we will expand on it. So huge opportunities that you've touched on, and I think one of the things we need to do over the course of the summer is to explain those tangible local benefits, and that's been a challenge up to now because we're very bogged down in framework and governance and how we tie all these things together, and also trying to bring partners together and make sure we're on the same page. But I hope that's a starter for 10 in terms of some of the benefits that we could see through this. Long way to go, but really optimistic. Any further thoughts and questions on this? No? Good, because I'm fed up with the sound of my own voice, and we are nearly done. Right, all those in favour then of accepting... Oh, Kate, of course, yes, sorry. Kate, I'll bring you in now. I tried to. No, go on.
Okay, well, yes, thank you. Yeah, okay, thanks for letting us speak. I think we need a little bit more work on so we can understand what you're expecting of us, because certainly our expectation in terms of being able to speak here was actually that as long as we said what the agenda item was and who we were, then we could just ask the question. So I think that's probably a conversation for outside this chamber, but we're still a little bit disappointed, and I think there is a real case for actually at a public meeting like this where important decisions are being discussed. I would argue that, the public might want to hear the voice of the opposition, but that's something for outside this meeting. Okay. This sounds really exciting, and I can see you're very energised by it. Great, and I hope it comes. But my question is specifically about paragraph 16 in the report. In summary, is that government have said we need to review the template proposals which sit outside the standard devolution framework. It might not be possible to take all these requests forward initially. Government will want to see more evidence and detail, and the process for prioritisation of proposals across D2 and 2 priorities is to be determined. And I think this is why we're concerned, given what's going on in Westminster. And you made a distinction between cutting and prioritising, but I think a little bit academic, to be honest with you, Ben. And in the end, I mean, to be honest, the majority of the services that are delivered in this country, the vast amount of money that we get from government is spent on local services. So how on earth all these candidates are coming forward and saying we're going to cut taxes, but we're not going to cut services? I think it's disingenuous. But anyway, we'll see, won't we? And it's worth noting as well that Michael Gove has been sacked by the Prime Minister, and the government minister who on this council negotiated with on devolution, Neil O'Brien, resigned from Boris Johnson's governments this week. A lot of changes. And I'm concerned both with that point 16 and the news from Westminster that will have an impact on the timeline and could, as I've just explained, have serious consequences for the county. So where within this timeline are we expecting for the process for prioritisation to take place? Is this happening now? And what's likely to be the impact? And given the meltdown in Westminster, I'm concerned about whether devolution and levelling up will even remain part of a future government's agenda, or whether it will happen at all, whether it will be watered down. I mean, I'm concerned that the narrative of the Conservative leadership race is being driven by, as Councillor Creamer said earlier, all candidates, or pretty much all candidates, talking of cutting taxes. And it's completely at odds with more funding for devolution. And as I said, it could threaten good quality service delivery. Right in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And I understand, I've seen on social media, I think, Ben, that you're stating your attention to back Kemi Badenoch, someone who very recently has criticised public spending levels and the net zero targets. I wonder if the environment is going to be another casualty here. I think I admire your enthusiasm and your ambition. I think that's good. I just wonder, really, given what's going on in government, whether actually you're being realistic about whether this is really going to happen, whether this is really going to work. I mean, I agree absolutely in terms of levelling up. We're all absolutely on the same hymn sheet with that one. If you look at the inequalities across the country about public spending, it's absolutely stark. When you look about the East Midlands, it's absolutely appalling. So we really do need something. So I really do hope that it happens. I just wonder, though. I just hope you'll keep us posted on how the negotiations are going on, how realistic we are, and when all these priorities have taken place, that actually, we'll get the news as to actually what's going to happen and what may not happen. Can I just, going to be very cheeky here and just say, in terms of the stuff around the adult social care stuff.
Oh, we've done that, Kate, if that's all right.
Yeah, I just want to say that
no, come on.
Well,
I'm trying to be nice.
You're limiting us to what we can say, and we weren't able to talk on the adult social care reform. So that's fair enough. I just would like to flag that up, because we're a lot more concerned than you are about it.
Well, look, I think the first thing on that, you're right that I'm trying to limit the conversation in this meeting, which is an administration business meeting, effectively, in terms of getting things approved. I'm more than happy where there are key concerns that you've not been able to address in other places that you feel are you've not had information or you've not been able to get them, or emergency things. Like, I understand, Minister resigns last week. Oh, that's a panic, and it's short term, and you can only really ask me. So I understand why that is an issue. On some of the others, could and should perhaps have sought briefings behind the scenes. I know in some cases have had briefings and have had the answers behind the scenes already, and therefore it becomes more political in terms of the questioning, doesn't it? And it's telling that quite a lot of the questions have focused as much on the Conservative leadership contest as on the Cabinet paper. So just to be clear, and I've said, I think, and the first thing I said at the start of day one, meeting one, of Cabinet, was that those speeches and questions should be the exception, not the rule, in exceptional circumstances where we've not been able to answer them at other times. You're right that the public should and need to hear the voice of the opposition. There are opportunities through full council, through the scrutiny process, 4 different select committees through scrutiny, to do that. And there are processes. So we're still learning, right? We're still getting there in the right place. But, I do intend to tighten down on that in the future. And I'd like to think, and it's a learning process for all of us, that where you have those questions and concerns in this new Cabinet structure, that your lead spokesman will feel that they can and will build relationships with our Cabinet members so that they can just go and ask those questions, and we don't have to do that in formal kind of Cabinet meetings, because, as I say, there are all sorts of areas within the Council that are for scrutiny and for opposition voices, and we want to use some of those to work with you on policy as well and constructively build policy through those select committees, but Cabinet is a administration business meeting where we try and take decisions. So just, I think, some work to do to get our heads around what meetings are for what, but we'll get there. You're right, and we could talk about it outside of this room. I think on the points around devolution, so on point 16, I think it's simply a case of that paragraph reflecting the fact that obviously both government and us have a headroom of capacity in terms of delivering these things. What's been delivered across other areas, take West Midlands, Greater Manchester, for example, is get a framework in place, get a structure in place. Some powers may be implemented on day one, some powers may be implemented on day 100, because it's difficult to work through a huge range of things all in one go. But that is very much a case of, which things are most developed to go first and which things might you do later. There's no question of you can only have these and not those. Government's been quite clear that any powers that are available to other places are available to us. And they also, when they talk about the off-framework parts, that's the bits that aren't available anywhere else. They're the things we want to try and pilot, and they're our asks. So we have got to enter into new negotiations with departments on those things. There's no precedent for those things. So part of the reason we want to go first is we want to try those. We want to be given the freedom to try new things. But that does probably require a more detailed conversation, negotiation, and a bit of a longer-term implementation plan, because they don't exist anywhere else. We can't just go and copy what somebody else has done. So that's what that paragraph refers to. It's not a case of us missing out on anything. And perhaps I'll ask Anthony in a second to just come in on the negotiations and how they've progressed up to now. Just on the more political point, which, as I say, is not really the business of this meeting, so it's slightly frustrating, but there is a massive difference between wanting the state to prioritise those things that are most important and not waste time and energy on junk, and cutting public services. I think the thing for me, and you mentioned, it's not a Kemi Badenoch advert, and I don't want it to become one. It's not the place for it. But when she talks about wanting the government to do fewer things better, I think it refers to precisely this. When we're in a place where we spend so much time and money on diversity officers and targets, and we can't get our basic public services right, and that is exactly the right thing. We should be focusing government in the places that most matter to our residents. That is local government and public services. And Kemi was the minister actually in November who gave us a very generous local government settlement that we were very happy with at the time. So I don't think we're in that place at all. I think in that conversation about national government being more focused, that actually speaks to devolution. That speaks to passing things out of that national arena and down to us on a local level. And I would hope that it would help reinforce and to grow our agenda and potential of what it is we're trying to do. So I do get frustrated at that. I think it's almost an ideological starting point, isn't it? That if you're talking about doing less, that must mean cutting really important things. I think there's a lot of junk that government does that it doesn't need to be involved in. And we spend a lot of time and energy reacting to Twitter's agenda rather than the public's agenda in some of that space. So I think that would be really refreshing. But we may have to agree to disagree on that, I imagine. So with that kind of covered, is there anything else anybody wants to pick up on devolution? No? Happy. Right, all those in favour then of this agenda item, thank you very much. Outside bodies, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Leader. The Council's revised constitution delegated the additional removal of outside bodies to Cabinet. So there are some to include and some to remove within the paper that's before us. So on page 91, the East of England and East Midlands Regional Youth Work Unit. So the Council has been named as a trustee to this organisation, which has extremely laudable aims, as outlined on page 92, and indeed would work very well with the Youth Investment Fund, as already talked about by the Leader. So the recommendation is to add this particular organisation to the register as a Category B body, and to appoint our Group Manager Young People's Services to that body as our representative. We then have the NHS Nottinghamshire Integrated Care Board, which we talked about at some length at full council, so I won't repeat or even try to emulate Councillor Dr John Doddy's eloquent speech on that item. But basically the recommendation here is to nominate the Corporate Director of Adult Social Care and Health to the role on that body, and agreeing that the ICB again be added to the list of outside bodies as a Category B organisation. We then come to the Nottinghamshire Combating Substance Misuse Partnership, which we are obliged to form and be a member of, and the paper that's before us today is to actually approve that body being added to the list and to approve the nomination of our very capable and able Director of Public Health as an interim senior responsible officer on that body. And then finally, to remove a body from the register, which is the Home Pierpont Leisure Trust, which effectively no longer exists, so there is no longer a need for it to be on our list. I did allude to the fact that Cabinet has the power to add and remove bodies to the list. The Cabinet Member for Business Management, which at the moment is myself, has a delegated authority to nominate individuals to represent us on those bodies. So I'd like to take this opportunity to make 2 slight alterations to the appendix at Appendix A. So on page 97, the Doncaster Sheffield Airport Consultative Committee, we will now have Councillor Keith Girling as the Council's nominated representative on that body. And if I can take you to page 98, at the top of the page, the East Midlands Freeport Board, because he has very little else to do, we'd also like to appoint Councillor Keith Girling to represent the organisation on that body. So, subject to those alterations at Appendix A, I move the recommendations on page 94. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that's all fairly straightforward. Any thoughts, comments? Are we happy with that? I'm looking forward to Councillor Girling representing us on a regional stage.
Just how thrilled I am. I'm absolutely thrilled.
Good.
Thank you very much, Leader.
Good. Tracy.
Thank you, Leader. It was really only to comment on the East of England and East Midlands Regional Youth Work Unit. It is not insignificant, the work that's done by the youth services of this council, particularly through the pandemic, with a lot of placement stability work. So the workforce was deployed in other and different areas of work. The leaders already referenced in this meeting the YIF, the Youth Investment Fund work that we're doing, and all of the work and focus on skills and youth work through the devolution deal. And I think it's very important that we have representation there. I'm also very pleased and grateful to the business manager that our nominee is Pom Bogle, who is very active, able, and leads the charge for this county with youth work nationally. So thank you.
Yeah, Pom's been doing a great job, and it's worth saying that when you compare with our comparable councils across the country, our youth service really is excellent. And the more we can do to invest in and build on that with that preventative agenda in mind, the better, in my view. Any further thoughts, questions? No? In that case, all in favour of this particular set of recommendations? Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of a fairly short and sweet meeting. So more of the same. Thank you very much.